Hello everyone and welcome to this video on how to explode a quote and language analysis. We're going to use the example of questions 3 for paper 2, and this is bookworm teaching. And the reason why we're looking at this is that it's the fundamental skill to help you for the GCSE English language exam. How was the writer used language to describe the house? The wooden planks which line the sides of the house were mismatched and rotten, as if taken from the decaying pieces of several hundred coffins. So you need to get into the habit of just underlining when you see a technique. Okay, so as if taken from the decaying pieces of several hundred coffins. So you should be able to pick up that that's a simile. Each slam of the door, blowing in the wind, was accompanied by the pained moaning of the rusted hinges. So this question is all about describing and what effects it is. So I'd say the pained moaning of the rusted hinges might be interesting as well. No one had lived there for many years, and although it looked upon an expanse of countryside, potential buyers always took one look at the empty windows, staring forlorn back and experience a sudden change of heart. So personally, I would choose one of those two quotes there to kind of pick for my language analysis. So now we're going to explode the quote. So to do this, first thing I'm going to write is sensory language at the bottom here. And it's just to show that I know what the technique is. So sensory language is when we use our language like what we can smell, hear, taste and touch. So the pained moaning of the rusted hinges, we can hear the sound of those hinges, and we don't have to talk about how that's going to make us feel. The thing I'm next going to kind of talk about is the individual words that have been used in there. So rather than just say the writer has used sensory language and try and talk about the effect, we try and go a little bit deeper, and we call this zooming in. So I'm going to focus on the word pained. I'm also going to focus on the word moaning because these look interesting to me. And this one isn't quite so interesting, but I think it's still valid. There might be something I can say there, and I'm just going to try and see if I can do this, see if I can talk about it. So first of all, whenever you got these words, you want to kind of say what kind of word that it is. So pained is an adjective because it's describing the noise. And personally, it shows that someone is suffering. Okay. People, it's not normal, and this seems a bit obvious, but you've got to state that it's not normal for someone to be in pain. So I'd actually say that it's quite abnormal. And it's almost, I'd say, quite distressing. Distressing. So sorry for my handwriting, guys. It's just a note that English can be messy when you're making notes. Okay, it's a perfectly acceptable thing. A page should be kind of massively annotated, especially when you're kind of looking at quotes. We've got moaning, so that's an ing word. The general rule for ing words is that it's going to be a verb. Something is moaning, that kind of gives it the quality of almost being alive, which is personification, if everyone remembers that, but I won't write it here because of space. So personification, it's almost alive, and I think once again, is something dying maybe? Something it's dying, it's clearly in pain. Even the word, pained itself means something bad has been done to it. Finally, we've got rusted, which is another adjective, and it means, to me personally, it means uncared for. And kind of means that it's uninhabited, but your interpretation will be your own interpretation. You get marked more on your ability to interpret rather than your interpretation being 100% correct. The examiner just wants to see that you've made those connections and had those thoughts. So here's my answer. The writer uses sensory language to make the house seem to be a scary place, a place that seems to be in pain. So straight away, if I was the teacher, I'd kind of give you a tick for using the sensory language because you've actually named the technique, and you've used your point. So as you notice, a point tends to be quite short. The quote, "the pained moaning of the rusted hinges," is my evidence. Now, I did a bad thing here and I didn't embed my quote. It's quite sloppy in my approach because it's actually quite difficult to do it. But I'll show you in the next example how to do that. The pained moaning of the rusted hinges. This describes the house as being a place that would inspire fear. So here we go. I've actually tried to answer the question. So usually with a piece paragraph, which is something that I recommend with students when they're first learning how to do this. We've got the point, evidence, and then we've got the analysis when we're trying to kind of say how that is kind of happening. So I'm talking about that it will inspire fear. This is particularly shown through the writer's use of sensory language. There's got connotations of not just fear but also pain. Um, so that's okay for like a quite a low grade, about C or level 4 really. But what we want to do is try and kind of get as close as we can to the highest grade, and we want to kind of zoom in. So this is seen through the writer's use of the verb moaning. Now this is when we're starting to zoom in. We're using our technical language of verb there, which is really, really good, which gives a similar sense to personification that the house is in pain, that perhaps it is haunted. Now the next bit, and this is something that I think really gives people a lot more marks, is you talk about how the language works in context. So that is the C. So context is the situation in which it's been used. So in this context, or in this particular situation, it makes the house seem sinister, as we then wonder what has happened and left this place empty. Why is this house being uncared for? Why does it have the rusty hinges? This is reinforced by the adjective pained. So once again, I'm just doing my zooming in, which has got connotations of suffering. This makes the reader think of someone being bodily hurt, giving the house a threatening feeling, as though something supernatural may be causing harm. Finally, the writer has also used the adjective rusted. So I'm just constantly using my technical language. The connotations for this are particularly sinister, but it does show the house as being uncared for, which would then further highlight that the house has been left to suffer in the aftermath of some unfortunate events. So you'll see in that last bit that I was trying to kind of explain what that overall effect is altogether. Now, I wouldn't say that it was a particularly strong answer. I'd say that it was quite rushed. I possibly could have went more into the context and explanation, and then I possibly would have got those higher level marks. But we'll look into that with the next example. So the next quote I want to look at is the decaying pieces of several hundred coffins, and I'm just going to write that that is a simile, which is a comparison using like or as. Next, I'm going to repeat the same process and just look at the kind of words that interest me. So decaying it seems to be a deliberate choice by the writer. Also, coffins are the ones that I'm going to kind of go into. So once again, so decaying. It's weird with this one because it's a verb, because it's got the ing word, but it's kind of also an adjective there. But if I was to say either way, I'd say in this case it's been used to describe the pieces of wood. So I'd say it's an adjective out of the two. Then I'd talk about the word decaying, which it basically means death to me. It means death. Once again, we've got the whole feeling of it being uncared for. Uncared for. I'm going to write the word rot there because these are the type of things that I associate with a typical kind of horror house type of thing. Next, we've got coffins. Now, coffins, that is a noun because it's the name of a thing. It's also, really sinister. Okay, sinister. And of course, it just means death. Okay, it means death. Yeah, and you've just got to kind of get across that feeling, really. It's been made of coffins, and it's not right that this house would be made out of coffins. Not right. It's not standardized pieces of wood. There's something definitely just wrong about the whole location. So here's my final answer. Now, I might have chosen one, or I might have chosen both of these quotes to use, but personally, I think I'll probably stick with just the one and figure out which one I think is the strongest, and possibly just make a reference to, the semantic field used throughout it. But I have seen some high-level answers that have used two, but I would say try not to kind of just dump as many quotes in as possible. But here's my answer. Through the use of the simile, so you get a tick for using there because it's a subject term, the writer creates a description that makes a house seem like a haunted or supernatural place. A tone wrongness is established that the house itself is said to be made up of decaying pieces of several hundred coffins. Now you might notice that that bit seemed quite smooth and natural, and that's because I've used something called an embedded quote, and that's when we use the quote as part of the actual sentence, suggesting that the construction of the house involved the desecration of several people's graves. See, I think here I should be talking about feeling, what the feeling is created and stuff like that, but the writer's description could be attempting to infer that this may mean that many people have died on this property, but it remains unclear. The writer's comparison is deliberately trying to get the reader to associate the house with death. This is achieved by the writer's use of the noun coffin. So I'm using my technical language and I'm zooming in and I'm using my quote marks to show that I've taken it from the text, which makes the house seem unnatural and spooky from the offset. The theme of death is reinforced by the writer's choice of using the verb decaying. So the writer chose to use that deliberately, and I'm trying to say why they did that. So this has got connotations of a decomposing body. The reader can imagine insects riddles. See, and it's important to always read through your work, even though you don't get marks in your spelling for this one, but look how terrible mine is. The riddled holes in the wood with splinters sticking out, but the description remains vague, making the reader assume that the house is being left to fall apart. So yeah, what I'm trying to show you there, guys, is that you can actually make quite a long answer from a short quote. So that to me is what language analysis is. You make a lot, you understand that a lot is happening through a small piece of writing because the writers made these deliberate choices. You need to talk about how the writers have made those deliberate choices. So for this answer, I would probably say I'm going to use the old school version of marking. I'd probably say I'm probably about a B. I'd say there. I wouldn't say it's an A yet because I think there's other technical things I could talk about. I particularly think the semantic field would have been useful and talk about more about how the description made the reader to feel. I think that would have been a lot better, and maybe picking up if there is any kind of just juxtaposition or any kind of foreshadowing, any larger techniques that might be in play here. I think that would really improve this answer. Finally, if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate it, and it makes a really big difference. Okay, thanks, and see you next time.